So again, hello everyone. Thank you for your patience. I know what you are waiting for. We have 30 minutes until lunch. And we will spend this half an hour on speaking about things like fashion, psychology, and a bit of coding guidelines. How does it sound? It's okay? Okay. I have a question for you. How many decisions do you think an adult person makes in a single day? I would like you to raise your hands, like in school, and keep your hands up as long as you agree. Please, raise your hands. So, who thinks that we make at least 10 decisions a day? At least 50? At least 100? Okay, 500? 1,000? Still some hands, I can see some hands still. 5,000? 10,000? 50,000? 100,000? 500,000? I can see still some, okay. Well, we stop here. I'm an evil person. You could ask my wife, she would confirm. And I don't share the answer now. I will share it by the end, and if I forget, which might happen, just please remind me at the Q&A session that, hey, you didn't share what you promised. So let's have a look at the agenda. We are going to define what we mean by coding guidelines. Then we'll see why coding guidelines are useful for those who read code, for those who write code. Well, usually they are pretty much the same. Not completely, and not the same time, and why guidelines are useful for the management. Okay? And then we are going to spend some more time on the psychological aspect. And then we'll conclude just before lunch. So, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Sandor DARGO. I work for AMADEUS, so in the travel and hospitality industry, if you book airplane tickets, well, you have like 40-something% chance that you pass through our reservation systems. I've been working for them for 6 years, 4 months and 30 days, anniversary, month anniversary tomorrow. I like blogging. I mostly write about C++ and a bit about the books I read, not just IT. And I like to blog about Stoic philosophy as well. So you can check out my blog if you are interested in any of those topics. And I like a lot of things like baking with sourdough at home. And I'm happy but a bit tired, father of 2 wonderful small kids. But that's enough about me. Let's go and define what are coding guidelines. You might think that it's just about how you format code, but it's way more than that. It's not just about where you put your braces and how many white spaces you enter here and there. It can be, and it should be, about much more. It can include accepted style in terms of how you structure the code. It can include like how long your functions, your classes should be. It can be even more than that. You can include practices that you should use. Like for example, you should or should not, depends on your team, use braces in each block of code. What I mean is that if, for example, in a for loop, you have only one line, you are not obliged to use braces, well, in most of the languages, but you might want to, because who heard about Apple's go-to-failure bug? One person, I can see one person. So it was like they didn't use braces, and a developer put an extra line, put an extra go-to-failure in one block. But as there were no braces, it was interpreted without any condition. So it was that module always went to failure. You might want to include such things into your coding guidelines. But you can include methods and methodologies as well, like how you should manage your version control. You should use Git workflow or any other methodology. And you can include your acceptance criteria as well, acceptance criteria for user stories, for example. You can include the level of testing that you require. Is it acceptable for you, or you would like to add something more? Feel free to add if. Okay, then we move on to the next slide. So we are going to see why coding guidelines are good for the reader, why they are useful for in fact, mostly for the developers when they read code. So, for example, if I join to a new project where I don't know the code base, I don't know the developers, I haven't seen any pull requests before. If first I skim through the coding guidelines, it sets my expectations. I will know what kind of style they should use, what things they should pay attention to. And even if I don't agree with some of the parts because I prefer another bracing style, for example, I will not comment on it. I know what to pay attention to. In fact, if I know the guidelines and if the developers use the coding guidelines, it will be easier for you to review code, not just to read, but to review in a pull request. And you can focus on what is important instead of pointing out non-important things. I have a question for you. Who remembers this pyramid from university, maybe? Who knows the Maslow Pyramid? Okay, quite a lot. Quite a lot of you. So, just a bit of a recap. In the bottom, you have psychological needs. So, we humans first, we have to satisfy our basic physiological needs, like we need a shelter, we need some food and water. And only when this is satisfied, or needs are satisfied, we can go to our safety needs. We have to feel secure and safe. And when we do so, then the next level is about belonging to a group or to a family, and to have some love in our life. And if you go up on the pyramid, you have, let's say, more niche needs, like you have to feel some accomplishment, or even that you want to achieve your full potential. But in order to do that, first, we need some food and water. Now, if your code is scattered and you don't follow any guidelines and it's just formatted in, well, in multiple styles at the same time, you will have to focus on the very basic needs. You have to format it because you can't read it well, you can't read it fast, you don't understand what's going on. First, you have to satisfy those needs. We are on that very basic level. And the coding guidelines can help you to satisfy those needs. We'll see how. So, as you know, code, well, we read it a lot. Sometimes it's executed by a machine which doesn't really care how it's formatted, because it's been translated to binary anyway already. But programs, basically, they are meant to be read by humans, and accidentally they are executed by a machine. I don't say it. It was said by Abelson and Sussman in their very important book on structured computing. And well, then the question is like, but how much? How much you read code? Well, Uncle Bob, Robert C. Martin, has some studies on it, and he arrived at the conclusion that you read code at least 10 times more than you write it. You write it once, but maybe you read it 10 times. It's a lot. But if you think about it, you read code even when you write code. Because, well, unless you are on a greenfield project and you put down the first lines of code, Well, you will have to read the code. You will have to understand the code to see where you can insert yours. And, well, that's already one. And I guess we've all been to a situation when we had to reread our own code that we wrote a few months ago, and, well, we couldn't manage to. I was there. So, can you read this? I mean, can you see it? Yeah. What things do you see that is not so great in this poorly formatted code? Indentation, yes, that's something very bad, because you see that, well, you are in an if block, but then you go to the wrong way with the indentation. There are some other things. You can see code duplication in it, like the same condition appears in multiple blocks. You have strange names, like you have somewhere in the middle cell variable, and then you have cell2. Well, what does it mean? It means just nothing. Well, let's have a look at the next slide. How does this look like? Is it better? Okay. It's the same code. This is taken from an open source project called Fitness, and I obfuscated the code a bit. I wanted to use our own code, but I was thought, okay, don't share that. So I had to go to GitHub first, and here you see that well, some parts of the code are extracted and well named. So we limit the length of a function, and we remove code duplication. We use more meaningful names. You don't have cell and cell2 anymore. You have a more meaningful name like argument cell, and well, I can't see now the other. It doesn't really matter. But you can see that just by applying some basic rules, and part of it can be even automated, at least the checks, you can arrive to a much more readable code. And here, you don't have to spend your time on understanding what it is about, but you can focus on what is important. So we see that if we apply some basic guidelines, our job as a code reviewer, a reader, becomes much easier. But obviously, it's a bit more difficult for the writer of the code, yeah? Because you have to think more about what you do and how you do. But I think it's still worth it, even for the ones who write the code. But why? Who knows, well, this measurement of quality code? I see some smiling faces, yeah. So basically, you can listen to the people behind the door and count the number of what the fucks, and you divide it by the minute they spend on your code when they review. Well, if you adhere to your coding guidelines, what you use in your team, in your company, you will receive less comments. Isn't that good? Yeah? You will receive less questions on variable names if you follow the rules your team set. And on style, I hate to receive, not just to receive, but to make comments on coding style, because that's something we shouldn't really care about. But when it's inconsistent, it's bad. It's difficult to read. So obviously, you have to make the comments. And honestly, if you receive less comments, even if your code is not so elegant, not so optimal, you will be perceived as a better coder. And, well, it's just good for even for your career, for your reputation. And what I already mentioned, most of us have been to a situation when we had to reread our code and we didn't understand anything at all. Maybe we didn't even realize that it's our code. But then when you check the commit history, oh, it was me. How could I do that? Well, if you use your guidelines, then you will need less time to reread your own code. You will understand it quicker. You can amend it faster. In fact, with all of this, you achieve better quality in your code bases. If normally, if you have better quality, your satisfaction with your job will be higher. And well, we spend a lot of time in our jobs. So at the end, we'll have a happier life because it's a significant part of it. Do you agree with this? Yeah? Okay. But why guidelines are good for the management? Well, I think we already have most of the answers, not all of them, but most. Who knows what's the name of the CEO of Virgin? Richard Branson. You know what he said about the importance of taking care of your clients and your employees? He said that you don't really have to take care of your clients. First, you have to take care of your employees, and if they are happy, they will take care of the clients. So it's really important that your employees are happy and satisfied. And we saw that with the usage of guidelines, coding guidelines, you have better quality, and well, in in a few indirect steps, you end up with more satisfied employees. And if you have more satisfied employees, your clients will be also more satisfied and happier. Another thing is that you can onboard newcomers to your team faster because they understand how they should write code. They well, maybe they will have to pass through several rounds of code review, but definitely less than they would need to otherwise. And some parts, you must have coding guidelines because it's part of the audit criteria. So if you know the SOX audit, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, it's somewhere from the States, it's a mandatory part of it to have coding guidelines. But we just passed our PCI DSS audit a few weeks ago, and it was a question there as well. Okay, so do you have coding guidelines in your team, in your company? Please show me, because it's something that they have to check. So you must have guidelines. I skip here a couple of slides about, let's say, mathematical definition of how you calculate costs of a software that you can get if you check the slides online later. We are going to pass right away to these two slides. And on the left side for you, you can see when you are focusing on just short-term deliveries. So maybe in the beginning, you're a manager who wants to rush, okay, we just have to push out this new feature and we must deliver. And you don't really take care of quality. And you spend some money on it, you get some value of it. Okay, that's still fine. The next step, it's still fine because you can still deliver. But then the speed of your delivery is slowing down because your code is just bad. It's like a big monstrous spaghetti code, and it's really difficult for the developers to add new features. And as you can see, well, the efforts, in fact, they are much bigger than the value they add, and most probably your project will either suffer on the long time or it will just die. And it's because you didn't focus on quality in the beginning, from the very beginning. On the right side, you see that in the beginning, maybe you have to spend some more money, some more time on developing the new features, organizing your code, applying the guidelines, automate everything that you can regarding the guidelines and other things. But in the long run, Well, of course, here this is an extreme example, but in the long run, your maintenance costs will be much lower because because partly of coding guidelines and the whole mindset it brings. So my message here is if you are just penny-wise on the short term, it makes you, say, pound foolish on the long term, and it's better to invest in quality, in proper guidelines from the very beginning. You might ask, okay, but where is that T-shirt from the title of the presentation? Well, you will get even more than just a T-shirt. You have a myriad of clothes here. So, what do you see? What are the similarities between these pictures, between these people? We can get back to it. You will understand why. Simplicity, yeah? Sorry? Yeah, clever people? Exactly. People who wear every day the same things. Now, I was looking for ladies, but it doesn't happen. They might apply the same rules, but in a different way. They might have assistants who help them choosing their clothes and dresses every day, but that's not so good for this picture. So the idea is that these people, they have to make a lot of decisions, and they don't want to decide every day what they should wear. They just always wear pretty much the same thing, or almost the same thing, but their style is consistent, and they don't waste their willpower on something that's not important. Because at the end of the day, you have just that much amount of willpower. You cannot force yourself to decide all day in everything. So you want to limit the number of decisions you made, because each and every of them has a cost. And you want to focus in that limited amount of willpower that you have. You want to focus on what matters, what is important. So I asked you how many decisions we make a day, and now I'm going to share. We make about 35,000 decisions every single day. That's the amount an adult makes. A child makes like 3,000 decisions. It's a lot. Probably, well, you don't just decide on big things, but on small things. What do I eat for breakfast? Well, these people usually they eat the same things every day because that's not a decision for them. That's made once and for all. You decide whether you cross the red light or not. Hopefully not, but who knows? Maybe I just made the decision. Do I put my hands here or not? So many micro decisions you make, and you want to limit the amount of such decisions as they do. That's why genius people are so frugal with their willpower, what they decide on. So I suggest to use coding guidelines against decision fatigue, because you don't want to decide on where you should put your braces every time. It should have been already decided by someone else. By someone else, maybe you were part of the team that time, but it should be decided once and for all. And then you just do what you have to do according to the guidelines. Because these small decisions, what's, let's say, the longest function possible in your code, well, you don't really have to think about it. It's written. You don't pass 20 lines, 10 lines, 5 lines, whatever it was decided. If you are in doubt, you just follow the guidelines, and you can invest your energy in activities with much higher added value, like how you structure your architecture, how you want to implement your feature, what kind of algorithms you want to use. These are way more important than where you put an extra empty line. And even better, if you don't even have to follow that much the guidelines because it was automated once and for all. And we are reaching to the conclusion. So I would suggest you to use guidelines to avoid decision fatigue, to increase the readability of your code, and upgrade the quality. Okay? As such, you will improve the satisfaction of your team and of your clients in the long run because of the better quality, and you will reduce the long-term cost of your software. Now, I would like you to try this in your team. Check what are the available industry guidelines. If you need some extra rules, add them. I'm part of the C++ governance board in my company, and we just had a discussion. Okay, we should follow the core guidelines, the ISO core guidelines of C++, but sometimes we would like to be more strict. Is it fine? I think it's fine. You should at least use the industry guidelines, but then you can add your extra rules if you want, and enforce the rules. Because if they are just there but not enforced, it's not good. But a good way to do that is automating formatting. For example, what we did is like when you configure a project that you just cloned from the repository, you install a pre-commit hook. So you do your code anyhow you want, and when you commit, it's formatted according to the guidelines. And since then, basically, we never had to comment on the style in a pull request. We focus on what is more important. And it gives, honestly, it removes a lot of tension from code reviews. And it's just another message. They're always test and refactor because they are good habits, but they're not strictly with this. Thanks a lot for your attention. If you have any questions, we still have some time, or if you have some comments, feel free. I'll stay here. You can share it from there if you want. Yes? Mm-hmm. That's more difficult. Yes, but it's a valid point. I mean, yes, SonarQube can be useful. It points out things about complexity of your classes, like cyclomatic complexity. It's already useful. But the idea is that you get rid of, you already get rid of many things that you have to check about smaller things. So you can focus on those things in your reviews that you just mentioned. I don't really have specific plugins where for C++, it was already quite more difficult to automate these things than for Java or Python, for example, or Go. Thanks for your question. Any other questions? Then thanks a lot for joining, and enjoy the lunch.